So is the RV market kind of tanking the way a lot of people seem to think it is? What's going on with gas prices coming into fall? And how's the government shutdown going to affect the outdoor industry and lifestyle as a whole? That and more in this month's RV Industry Update. My name's Josh the RV Nerd. Let's get into it. Man, it's bright. So if I'm squinting a lot, that's what's going on. Anyway, let's get right down to brass tacks. It was really interesting to me in my last industry update. This guy left me this big old nastygram that basically said, you only talk about what's good, you never talk about what's not good. I have flat out said things like sales are down and the market is down time and time again this year. So I don't know that I follow that line of logic. And in the spirit of that, just cutting through everything, not talking about shipments, talking about sales. Sales are down 4.67% year over year. That is not a positive factor. It's not as bad as it was. Last year, if you looked at the same time last year, year over year, sales were down something like over 8%. So the rate of decline has diminished significantly, and fall sales and interest levels and like searches are actually up quite a bit. So what it kind of indicates is a little bit of a stabilization of the marketplace happening, but some sectors of the industry have definitely fared better than others. Overall, everything is down, but towables down by percentage significantly less than motorized. Towables down about 4%, whereas motorized is down about 10.5% year over year. So right now compared to 12 months ago. Those numbers seem a little weird. Remember, when you factor in the volumes, 4% towables down, the overall marketplace down 4.67%. There's just not a lot of motorized to shift that number, despite the fact that motorized is off a bigger clip. The biggest hits have been in fifth wheels, Class A and Class B motorized stuff. Although, interestingly, used RVs sales is up a little bit, about 1%. Not much, not like, whoa, used RVs are carrying the market. No, just used RVs are up slightly. And interestingly, RV search activity from consumers, like, travel trailers near me on Google or something like that, that traffic is up significantly, about 14% year over year, which indicates people are in the looking phase. They're at the top of the funnel before they start filtering into the potential sales segment of things. And that's a good positive sign for future health of the industry. But on the flip side, supply is outpacing demand. While that overall search volume is up, inventory supplies are up about 16%. So let's think about this. Not every person who's searching or looking for an RV is going to become an RV buyer or owner, but the volume of available inventory has outpaced that potential search and demand, even assuming a 100% purchase throughput, which is not going to happen. So we are still, even after the last 2 or 3 years, still in a phase where we have more supply necessarily than demand. Now, you always need a little bit of stuff on the shelf, obviously, as it were. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because that's not a long-term sustainable model. If you end up with more, like increasingly more supply than the demand picks off, eventually the industry goes into cardiac arrest. Factories go into shutdown because dealers stop ordering stuff for a while. And that's happened several times over the past years. And I just hope, I can hope, but the fact is, I'm pretty sure this industry is just going to continue to repeat that cycle ad infinitum. And taking a look over in the used RV market, looking at like major auction wholesale values, you'll see the most recent stats show a little bit of a tapering off on the overall average price tags for both motorized and towable. I tend to put more stock in the towable stats just because the motorized stats can get wonky real fast if somebody throws a couple diesel pushers across the auction block, just because, again, the volume's so much lower. 1 or 2 big units has a big impact very quickly. But what's kind of happening here is price tags always tend to follow the weather. You know, as it starts to get colder, as we officially enter shoulder season here, coming into the fall camping kickoff, that means that typically prices start tapering off for a couple reasons. It presents some interesting opportunities potentially for buyers, but not without drawbacks. I'm never going to share only one side of the coin. One of the things that's happening here is as new 2026s are entering the field, existing holdover 25s, well, they start to be that arterial plaque that causes that RV heart attack that I mentioned a second ago. And if you don't keep your inventory rolling and turning, then your dealership ends up going out of business effectively. So what's kind of happening here is that with the 26s coming out, there are potentially deals available on some 2025 holdovers, some of which are literally only a month or two old, if you check the production tags. Now, some are certainly much older than that. But what this can mean for a prospective buyer is that if you are, like, if you're in a bad spot on a trade, or you're just a deal hound and you're hunting that thing, you don't mind that it doesn't have every one of the new features, maybe it has most of the new features, that's where those holdover 25s can present a really good opportunity for you. You can get the deal on that aged holdover unit that the dealer's most interested in letting go. You can avoid that spring rush and show season, never have to miss a day of camping the season coming up. And currently, if you look at black book values, your existing trade will be worth more now as compared to springtime, because between now and then, that black book's probably going to update about 2 more times, and they only go one direction. The black book values, things don't tend to appreciate, they tend to depreciate. These are depreciating assets. Again, never let it be said that I'm not willing to call a spade and a duck a duck. But there's always drawbacks to various things. One of the most major drawbacks is just the timing of it all. If you do live where it's a little bit chilly and you got to put the camper away for the season, you might get the deal on it now, but then you got to kind of sit on the camper for the most part. You have very limited usage time remaining as we enter shoulder season here, and you don't get to use it a lot before you have to put it away. Then you're talking insurance, storage, payments over the winter for one additional season, because over the scheme of things, you're only talking about the difference of one additional season, but that's a very real factor for people to consider. And I would look at it the exact same way. I just want you to understand that there are opportunities, but every benefit does come with the drawback. So my goal is not to tell you to buy an RV now, it's to give you information and let you decide if it's the right time for you or not, because the fact is, spring is right around the corner. And I came into a sobering statistic and metric recently here. I have been well aware of the fact that more and more people are turning to RVs as a full-time permanent residence as compared to a traditional housing scenario. I was not aware of the rate and frequency as to how quickly that has bloomed as a reality for folks. The concept of full-time RVing is something that some folks had enjoyed, largely by choice in the past, but it's becoming not a choice and becoming a matter of necessity and borderline survival for a lot of people right now. One of the major factors here is the increase of housing costs versus, average incomes that a lot of people have. The number of people full-time RVing in an RV by choice or by necessity is now about 500,000. And maybe that doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of people, but that has more than doubled since 2021. In only a couple years, the number of people fully residing in RVs for one reason or another has doubled. And that's a very spooky statistic for me, because despite all the things that a lot of people want you to believe about these things and which RVs have full-time warranties and whatnot, one of the things that this is just my personal opinion, but these things are not intended for full-time 365-day-a-year occupancy. It's just not what they're made for. Even the bigger, fancier fifth wheels and whatnot, that's just really not their intention. Some might be built with the idea of extended occupation, but 100% full-time occupation, That's not really what this is for. That's why this sounds stupid, but that's why they're called recreational vehicles, not residential vehicles. As dumb as it sounds, those words mean something. Like a toy hauler is not a car hauler. Those words mean something. And with more and more people fully occupying these things, that's a really spooky concern for me. One, just for the general economic welfare of a lot of individuals, but also the service side of this business. I don't know I'm going to say I don't know. I personally feel it is not there to be able to properly support a growing number of people with a potentially growing number of service needs due to increased occupancy. That's just a major fear that I have, but like no one has an answer for it, so no one's really talking about it, but that's a thing. I dove into these stats a little bit further, and about 1 in 3 full-time RVers have kids, and their average earnings per year is about less than $75,000. When you look at the average cost of housing right now, these are people who are not able to take part in the traditional housing experience. And I don't see that changing. I see this growing, and I see it becoming, it's a small piece, a small sliver of the pie right now, but I see it becoming a bigger and bigger thing. And I feel if this industry doesn't build things accordingly for folks in these scenarios, most of which are not able to afford a top shelf, $150,000 fifth wheel, which is still, in my opinion, not made for full-time occupancy, I think that we might have a major problem. It hasn't boiled over yet in the public spectrum, but I feel like it's on its way to heating up. Now, a major potential kink in the works for a lot of folks right now is, what is happening with public lands during a governmental shutdown. Now, what I'm not going to do in this video is get into things like who is at fault or why or what's the holdup. That's not the scope and the scale of this channel. I do not feel it's appropriate for me to comment on something like that. All I'm going to do is explain that if you are a person who is interested in utilizing some of our public lands like national parks or anything like that during a governmental shutdown, what could you expect? It varies a little bit by, depending on which little alphabet group of our government you're looking at, like NPS, Fish and Wildlife, BLM, etc. But the long and the short of it is that while some of the trails or roads or like boat ramps and launches and stuff like that might be available, anything to do with any staff that supports those things, or potentially even water service to restrooms at those facilities, or even access to the facilities, period, you pretty much shouldn't bank on that. You should almost expect things like all the buildings to be shut and locked down and restrooms be not available. So definitely plan accordingly if that sort of trip was on your bingo card in the current sphere of things. Now, keep in mind, at the time that I'm recording this, I have to record these news type videos about a week before they go live. So if this whole thing has changed in the meantime, ignore this whole segment of the video and clip on. Diving a little bit further into this, I found this little thing where about 2,050, give or take, employees have been targeted for termination from some of these things like NPS, BLM type, fish and wildlife parts of our public services. And I also saw there's an estimate that having our national parks closed and all these things closed is costing them about $1 million per day in entrance fees and campground fees and things like that, which they generally really depend on to keep operating, because their budget allowance isn't typically enough to keep up with all the things that they need. So while obviously a very short-term, you could say, annoyance and problem, and especially for the people that work at those facilities who are, furloughed or potentially targeted for termination, where their incomes are now in jeopardy, the long-term ramification of this is that it could have a long-term ripple effect, negative effect on a lot of these parks and public lands. Hopefully, this resolves sooner than later, and we can get back to enjoying the lands that our tax dollars pay for. Jumping over to the current scope of fuel pricing, fuel prices have been very quiet this year. They've stayed unusually consistent for a long time right now. It is expected. We have seen a little bit of slight relief at the pump coming into shoulder season here. I think largely because fewer people are taking road trips currently, so it has reduced some pressure on some of that demand. I would be kind of curious to hear from anyone who's willing to share down the comment section there. Did fuel prices have any effect on your potential trip planning this year? Do you have any fall trips planned that might be able to take advantage of reduced number of people in the parks now that the kids are back to school? This is my favorite time to go camping, by the way. It's just a little bit quieter, if you know what I mean. Any major fall road trips in mind for you where you can you're thinking of taking advantage of a little bit of relief at the pump there? Now, we're currently at my hometown superstore in Coldwater, Michigan. We're back actually in what we just generally call the service lot. Some of these units are sold, waiting for, final PDI preps, but a lot of these are here for service work. And as you can see, we're pretty full up. And there's probably a lot of service needs out there, a lot of RV customers who we haven't been able to schedule just because we maybe don't have the capacity to bring any more on right now. So finding ways to reduce repair event cycle time is something that we've been really focused on very heavily over the last couple of years. Those who watch regularly may be aware of all the efforts we've put into our RV Fix service, originally called Bish Fix, now called RV Fix, something that we've made nationally available even to people who didn't purchase from Bish's RV in an effort to help them reduce their repair event cycle time. But as we've gained more and more data, we've been able to identify a couple things that take abnormally long, even as compared to an abnormally long average, to get replaced. And a couple of those are glass products, windows, doors, windshields, those, full glass touch doors, and graphics, basically, stickers, decals, all that kind of stuff. So we went looking. How can we find a way to address the biggest pain points? And we've actually, Bish's RVs formed a partnership with a company called Glass and Graphics. Interestingly enough, I believe they're based out of Florida. The idea here is, rather than always going through an RV manufacturer's parts team and adding additional links to the chain, we are making efforts to form and establish actual partnerships with the suppliers themselves directly. And I know this sounds like, why hasn't this been done before? A lot of suppliers will only work with an OEM, aka an RV manufacturer. They often won't deal with someone like us. So, finding a group that is willing, even on a, limited case basis, is very, very handy, because things, trying to get replacement windows, especially anything glass based, because typically, a glass problem in an RV, with very few exceptions, tends to be what we call a camp critical item. It takes your RV out of service. It's out of commission. Whereas stickers, decals, graphics, those are cosmetic. They don't stop you from camping. Yeah, you might not like the look of it, but you can still go out and have the trip with the family. But just getting stickers to put on these things sometimes takes just an astronomically long amount of time. So working on ways to reduce that. Our goal is, to continue to reduce that overall repair time, and with the major goal of keeping keeping the RV in your driveway and keeping it out of ours. So just a thing that we did that I wanted to pass along. And it seems like every other day we're introduced to some new smart appliance that we've gotten along fine without all these years, but suddenly the commercial says you can't live without it. So, we have things like where you can ask your microwave to tell your refrigerator to schedule a reminder to send an email to your subconscious to get eggs. These convenience things that we absolutely apparently cannot live without. And admittedly, some of them are very, very cool. But more and more smart appliances are coming. It's a little more common, the smart home concept, but more and more RVs are picking up smart features as well, with all sorts of smart command systems, some of which operate in a very stupid fashion, but neither here nor there. The fact is, with this happening, a new conversation needs to be had about data security. And when you have more devices capturing more information, sometimes it is very unclear how this information is captured, how it is used, how it's protected, where it is sent to. There have been documented instances in the RV industry where certain smart command systems have a listening feature, and everyone's told, oh, no, this information never gets sent to any sort of like server anywhere, only to literally find out it went to some sort of Chinese server that nobody knows what actually happened to any of this data or what was parsed or anything like that. So appliance smart home security is becoming a bit of a talking point, and that is something that I do think will roll into the RV industry. Some folks already kind of feel that way, and they're like, yeah, I don't want a system that listens to me talk. I just don't. I get that. If you're worried about your refrigerator ratting you out to the FBI, turns out currently you might want to trust GE a little bit more than the other manufacturers. A third-party, independent market like data intelligence group called Breakthrough Cybersecurity, or Cybersecurity Breakthrough, one of those two, recently did this big independent study of all these smart appliances and effectively found GE is putting in the most efforts that are the most effective at protecting any and all of that information as it relates to you that gets funneled somehow through all these crazy smart appliances. How exactly, nobody even seems to understand or know or be able to explain to me or anyone else. But again, if you're worried about your refrigerator ratting you out to the FBI and your microwave listening to you dance like no one's watching, then I guess maybe GE might give you a little more peace of mind than some of the others. Neat little thing also becoming a little more available specifically to the smaller type trailers, like say 25 foot and smaller. Suburban has recently released their RV1, which is a combination tankless on-demand water heater and furnace unit. Very similar in concept to something like a Truma Combi unit that you may have seen or heard about through like Ember RVs or some of our videos on those right there. But the idea is that it's slightly larger than either a water heater or a furnace, but it's significantly smaller than a water heater and a furnace. And when you're in small RVs that have limited space, anything that simplifies the process and opens up more space and allows you to squeeze something into a smaller area is a good thing. And I'm sure it won't take RV manufacturers too awful long to adopt this, because one of these is going to be less expensive than a water heater and a furnace. So don't be surprised if we start seeing more and more combo water heater furnaces coming into the small camping sectors. And I'm kind of hitting that age where I'm walking around and I just see something and I'm like, oh man, like that's a cool rock. You know what I mean, right? Like that's a cool rock. It's that dad sort of thing where like you get a box from Amazon and you don't want to throw it away, so you bring it to work. You're like, hey, somebody need a box? That's a nice box. Someone's gonna want that one day. Anyway, sorry, squirrel. Back to the task at hand. General Motors has announced they are ending production of their Bright Drop electric RV chassis, basically. This was basically the long and the short of it. Things on this chassis weren't selling, and GM wasn't, didn't have enough demand to keep production allotted for that thing in that Ontario facility where those came from, and they're pulling the plug on it. This is especially a punch in the teeth for things like that new Coachman RVEX, however you want to say it. All electrified Class B motorhome. It literally was just announced and it was just debuting in the marketplace, and they lost their chassis. And without a chassis, you don't really have a motorhome. So I gotta believe that announcement came as a really bad day at the office for that division. There are other potential electrified solutions, but the fully 100% electrified RVing concept still continues to struggle to catch on in North America. And it's not to say, like, there's still development happening there. More and more builders, more brands. Like I know Jayco has something in the works on that, but it feels like it's a long way off yet before it is really reasonably adopted. I would be kind of curious. Anybody watching this, what would it take for you to feel comfortable adopting a 100% ERV lifestyle, electrified RVing? Is there even a criteria you can imagine that would get you there? And speaking of electric stuff, let's talk air conditioning. Coleman is firing back at Furrion right now with the release of their new IntelliCool air system. So those who maybe are or are not familiar, I don't know, Furrion, a supplier, has been making these things called a chill cube air conditioner, which is a variable output compressor unit. Basically has a soft start function built right into it. And instead of achieving your desired cooling and then shutting off while the RV immediately begins to heat up inside, it adopts more of what you find on the dashboard of a lot of newer vehicles, where you have a heating and cooling function with an auto mode, where it will reduce the compressor and fan output to maintain that comfy temperature once it achieves that. Coleman didn't really have an air unit that did that, and now they do. And basically it looks like they are part for part, feature for feature, essentially trying to match the Furrion things, where it's an 18,000 BTU variable output compressor, soft start function. Allegedly, it says it's quiet when you need it. I gotta believe that probably means that it's louder on full cool crank, and then it tapers down to a cooler mode. But I mean, anytime you have something with a variable output compressor, you're going to have variable levels of turbulence, which is where the actual noise comes from. So don't be surprised if we see more and more of these 18,000 BTU variable output compressor air units coming out on more and more RVs, which frankly, I'm not mad at it. I'm kind of curious as to why things like RV air conditioning hasn't seen any significant tech updates in like the last 30 years. This is like the first mini shift in something like this that we're seeing. I think that's probably the reason a lot of people are really excited about what Axiom is doing with their mini split air conditioners. But overall, mini splits are just not a widely available thing in the main bulk of the RV marketplace. So any sort of improvement we see on something like this, I'm personally kind of excited about. And finally, if you've ever thought to yourself, man, I could really go for an RVing excursion while munching on some of America's favorite French fries, folks, your time has arrived. The McDonald's Monopoly game is back, hopefully corruption-free this time. If you're not aware of what I'm talking about, do some Googling into it. There's a reason you never got Boardwalk and Park Place before. It was rigged, not McDonald's fault. Somebody did stuff illegal. Anyway, McDonald's has partnered with Winnebago, interestingly, which I think they actually had done in the past in the original Monopoly thing that they did, where I think they have a Winnebago Thrive travel trailer and a Winnebago View motorhome as potential prizes in the little McDonald's Monopoly game. So I guess if the new RV price tag is a little unattainable, go purchase some French fries and cross your fingers. And little fun random trivia fact. Do you know the name of the Monopoly guy? Don't Google it. If you're willing, jump in the comment section. I'll give you about 5 seconds here to offer a response. His name is Milburn Pennybags. I learned that when I was a younger man, when my brother, for some reason, bought a book about the history of Monopoly and learned everything about it. So I picked some of that up by osmosis. That's also one of those interesting, what's it called when everybody has like the same shared wrong memory, whatever that's called, that the Monopoly guy doesn't wear a monocle, never has, but for some reason that's how most of us picture him. Kind of like the Fruit of the Loom thing. A lot of people picture that incorrectly, like with a big cornucopia. What is that called when you remember that wrong? When everyone remembers it wrong? Oh, that's gonna drive me. Wait. It's like the guy from South Africa. Mandela effect. Mandela effect. That's what that's called. Woo! We are getting there, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, we have gotten to the end of today's video. If you appreciate how we continue, again, to pull no punches and just tell you what's what and give you the reality of the situation, if you appreciate how we continue to do that, even when some of this news doesn't necessarily benefit a sales-based organization, purely doing this for customer benefit in that relentless pursuit of transparency. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. And until then, take care, stay safe, have fun, and good luck with your Monopoly tokens, everyone.